You're now listening to the Adiel Gorel Show. Each episode, I'll bring you the latest news from my discussions with top health and wellness experts so that you can bring yourself into better health. Today, on the Adiel Gorel Show.
In science, there were like 16 million studies listed in Medline. I looked up for everything I could about health and nutrition, disease and nutrition, because I understood the body's made out of food. So when something goes wrong with your body, the first thing you should do if you want to fix it is raise your standard of food intake. Now, it's also true for water and air, but I wasn't thinking about those at the time.
Hi everybody, it's a joy to be here with you again on this beautiful, cold, sunny day. And this is a particularly exciting time because we are going to be talking to Udo Erasmus. And for me, that is a name that I've been thinking about, knowing, reading for decades. I was always very interested in how we eat, what's good for us, what's not. And of course, Udo has been the number one, expert that people listen to on the subject of fats. So, I'm very gratified that you are here and that you took some time. I know you're busy to be here with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adriel. I'm glad to be doing this. This is fun for me.
So I know you've been doing it for a very long time because I was reading your materials and even using some of your products for a very, very long time. So if you can tell us just a little bit about yourself, how you got here, what was the path that you took, I think it would be quite interesting.
Yeah. Okay, well, I came out of the Second World War. I was born in 1942, so I'm 80 years old. I'll be 81 in May. And my parents were from Latvia and Estonia, German, Swedish background. And in 1938, Hitler and Stalin made a non-aggression pact. And they decided they were not going to fight with each other. Of course, they broke the pact later, but that's a whole other story. And and they, as a bonus for signing the pact, Soviet Union got Latvia, and Germany got part of Poland. But there was nobody from Latvia or Poland at the meeting. So they basically just stole it because they were big and they could. And my father loved the Russians and hated communism because he'd gone through the whole Bolshevik Revolution since 1918 to 1938, 20 years of complete disasters where governments stole everything from people. And he hated communism. And when Latvia was going to go to Soviet Union, he decided to leave his farm, basically lost his farm, and he was given a farm in Poland by Germany because he had German background. So I was born on that stolen farm, and the farmer whose farm it was became a farmhand for my father, which was a little bit tense until they said, look, this is a crazy time we're living in. Let's run the farm the way a farm needs to be run. Let's run it together. And they became really good friends. And then at the end of the war, they helped us get out of Poland because the communists were chasing us in tanks and trucks. And the Allies were using refugees as target practice. We were on dirt roads in horse-drawn hay wagons, no military presence. And the Allies were shooting at us from planes, and there were dead horses and dead people in the ditches. And then my mother decided it was safer. It was in winter, but it was safer to go through the fields than to stay on the roads. And so she had 6 kids with her. 4 of them she had to leave behind because she couldn't handle 6 kids walking through the fields. And I was one of the left behind ones. We ended up with a farmer who was a stranger. He took us to Berlin. I ended up in an orphanage because my relatives had already all run off. And then eventually my mother's sister came back and found us and dug us out, and we got reunited. But it was crazy. I was always really shy. I was always nervous. I never felt safe. I didn't know what I could trust because, during that crazy time, people told you one thing one day and they told you the opposite the next day. And I was like, you couldn't depend on anything. So when I was a little kid, now we're living in Germany, I listened to adults argue. And I thought what they argued about was trivial. And the arguments were always so intense. And it always made me uneasy. And one day when I was listening to yet another one of these arguments, the thought came to, man, there must be a way that human beings can live in harmony, or people can live in harmony. And this little cocky voice said, and I'm going to find out how. Being 6 years old and not knowing how complicated everything is, right? Okay, I'm just going to find out how. Right? And that's pretty much been my driver. I got into science because I wanted to understand how things work, because with my kind of insecurity, knowing how things works makes them predictable, and I found that helpful. Then I got into bioscience, biological sciences, because I wanted to know how creatures work. And this is all in the service of how can we live in harmony, right? How creatures work. And then I got into psychology to figure out how thinking works. And then I went into medicine to understand how health works. Found out that medicine doesn't teach about health, only about disease. And so I only lasted a year there and went back into biological sciences because I figured out in biological science, you are actually studying health because you're studying normal creatures in normal situations living normally. That would be a kind of a definition of health in line with nature, right? And then I got into biochemistry and genetics. And then I finally left. And eventually I picked up a degree in nutrition after I got poisoned by pesticides and a degree in counseling psychology. I got poisoned by pesticides when my marriage broke up because I was really upset and I wanted to kill something. So I took a job as a pesticide sprayer, full-time job. Was really careless. And after 3 years of being careless, I got poisoned by the pesticides I sprayed. I think that's a predictable outcome too. And the doctor couldn't help me. She said, we don't have anything for pesticide poisoning. So I decided that I would use my background that I had. I had good, solid science background from University of British Columbia. Use that to figure it out for myself. I had cancer to look forward to because more than 60% of the pesticides that we spray are carcinogenic. And we get to spray them, people get to make them, we get to spray them, and we don't actually have anything to fix the consequences. We call that freedom. I call it irresponsibility because freedom comes with responsibility. And so I started looking in the journals in Medline, in science. There were like 16 million studies listed in Medline. I looked up for everything I could about health and nutrition, disease and nutrition, because I understood the body's made out of food. So when something goes wrong with your body, the first thing you should do if you want to fix it is raise your standard of food intake. Now, it's also true for water and air, but I wasn't thinking about those at the time. So you raise your standard of food intake because every year, 98% of the atoms in your body are removed and replaced. So if you raise your standard, then within 1 year, you will have rebuilt 98% of your body to a higher standard. And a higher standard always means closer to being in line with nature and our nature. Because health was invented by life in nature as an adaptation for living in that natural system. Well, we've gone a long ways away from that, and most of our diseases are consequences of that, right? So I was looking at all of that and got involved in fats, and I read a study that said omega-6 is an essential fatty acid. And essential means, it's a very specific definition. You can't make it in your body from anything else, but you have to have it to live and be healthy, and therefore you have to bring it in from outside. So that's the first part. The second part is, if you don't get enough, then you cannot remain healthy. Your health will deteriorate. You will get deficiency symptoms because you're not getting enough. They are degenerative in nature, which just means your body's falling apart. They get worse with time, and if you don't get enough long enough, you die. So these are the essential building blocks for body construction, maintenance, and repair. You have to have them. So that's the second part. The third part, and this is the good news, if you're going down because you're not getting enough of an essential nutrient, if you bring enough of that nutrient back into your body before you die, because by definition, death is not reversible. So if you bring it back before you die, then all of the problems that come from not getting enough are reversed. Because life knows what to do with these building blocks, provided we take responsibility here at our mouth to make sure optimum amounts of these building blocks land in our body so life can do the job it knows how to do through using our genetic program. So that's the definition of essential. So the study says omega-6 is an essential nutrient. You can't live without it. You got to have it. All of that, right? And the next study I read says omega-6s cause cancer and kill you. And my head exploded. And I was like, wait, I have to have it to be healthy, and then it gives me cancer and kills me. How can that possibly be possible? And so that drove me nuts. And to try and figure out, because I had been poisoned by pesticides, I needed to really understand stuff. I couldn't just read it and come up with some cockabunga conclusion. I really needed to know, how do I deal with this? And that contradiction got me to look deeper into how oils are made by industry, and then, of course, beyond that, how we use them in food preparation. And it turns out that omega-3 and omega-6 are essential nutrients that we can't make but have to have. Every cell needs them. A whole lot of other molecules get made from them that have important health benefits. But these are the most sensitive nutrients of all of our nutrients. These are the most sensitive. They're damaged by light, by oxygen, and by heat. And so they need the most protection of all of our nutrients. We actually give them the least protection because we throw oils in frying pans where light, oxygen, and heat damage them all at the same time. So I usually, oh my God, what have I just got myself into, right? And then I found out that when oils are made by industry, they're treated with sodium hydroxide, a very corrosive base, then with phosphoric acid, a very corrosive acid. Then they're bleached with bleaching clays, and they go rancid, and they smell bad. And now they have to be deodorized, or I call it destinkerized, and then you have to heat them to frying temperature to blow off those damaged rancid molecules. And in that processing, 0.5 to 1% of the oil molecules are damaged. They're changed from something natural to something that never existed in nature. Well, if it didn't exist in nature, then life never made a program to break it down, because why would you do that, right? And so, because they're unnatural, wherever they go in the body, they interfere with what's supposed to be going on in that space. And that's why they cause problems. So then I thought, okay, well, let me call the oil industry. It's called the American Oil Chemists Society. And I got on the line. I said, I want to talk to a researcher who knows about oils. And when he got on the line, I said, well, when you know that this processing you do to oils does damage, why do you do it? Why do you do that? And he says, well, one of the reasons we do that is that when we treat the oil that way, we can get rid of half of the pesticides in the oil. And my head exploded again, because I've been poisoned by pesticides, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, the other half of the pesticides stay in the oil? I didn't even know there were pesticides in oil. So I said to him, well, why don't you start with organically grown seeds? And there was this long silence at the other end of the phone. And I waited, because that's a good question. And I guess nobody had ever asked him that question before. When he got back to me, he was really ticked. And he said, I don't know what your problem is. The oil is 99% good and it's only 1% damaged. And if you got 99% on an exam, you'd be damn happy, wouldn't you? So now I'm backing off. I say, yeah, well, maybe I'm overreacting. It's only 1%. So we were told as kids or in school, in university, when in doubt, do the math. So I did the math. So the question I asked is, if I have a tablespoon of oil that is 1% damaged by the processing, how many damaged molecules would be in that tablespoon of oil? So I'm asking you that question. And I know you don't know, but give it a good guess, unless you've heard it before.
No, I haven't heard it before, but that would be a very large number.
So how large?
I mean, probably in the billions.
Okay, so give me a number.
How many molecules are damaged in how much oil?
1 tablespoon, 1% damaged.
1 tablespoon of oil. I'm just throwing 6
Okay,
billion.
good, beautiful. Would you like to know how many there are?
Yes.
60 quintillion. So
Oh my!
you said 6 billion. You said 6 billion, right?
I'm not even a rounding error.
Trillion.
Not even a rounding
So
error.
3 more zeros to trillion, 3 more zeros to quadrillion,
Yeah,
3
yeah.
more zeros to quintillion. So that's 9 zeros, and 60 instead of 6. So you're 10 zeros too short. Now what is that? 1,000 million billion. So your answer is 10 billion times too low. So now I have another question.
Right.
You're getting on a plane to go home, and you're about to get on the plane, and somebody tells you, by the way, did you know that your chance of crashing and burning on this trip home was 10 billion times higher than you thought it was? Would you get on the plane?
No.
That's why when I was in Ireland, I told them I would canoe back to Canada. My chance wouldn't be good, but and people always estimate, the estimate that they make is always a billion times too low or even higher. And why I ask the question is because most people use oils. Most of your listeners probably use oils and they fry with them, which damages them more, of course. And they don't take 1 tablespoon, but 2 to 4 ballpark per day as adults. And there's pesticides in the oil that nobody talks about either. And then they do it for 10, 20, 30 years. And then maybe they get cancer. And they say, oh, I don't know, I always ate good. Because they didn't know. So this number, so what we're doing to ourselves is 10 billion times worse than we think it is. And is that a good reason to change the way you look at oils and what you use to try and support the health of your body so that you can live the longest, most productive, most enjoyable life possible? That's why I asked the question. That's why I asked the host, because, and it's not like, when you say 10 billion, that's already high. It's like some people say 1,000, right? So the conclusion to me was more health problems come from damaged oil than any other part of nutrition, because these are the most sensitive molecules and every cell needs them, and they're damaged the most. And more health benefits will come from making an oil change that your body needs from damaged oils to oils made with health in mind. So that's how I got into fats. And it was literally was the most confusing area, the most misrepresented area. And when my take home was, I can't get healthy on oils like this. We should make oils with health in mind. And so because I came off a farm and we tinker and we haywire things together and, we build things and, make things work, I developed a method for making oils with health. In 1981, I started. And then we put that in practice. We had engineers build it. And in 1986, we began to make oils with health in mind. Now, the other thing, before I go there, this other thing that happened is 1980 is the year I got poisoned. 1981, it was established that omega-3s, not just omega-6s, There was confusion about the issue. But that omega-3s are essential nutrients. And that came from a study with a kid who was on intravenous nutrition. And they didn't have any omega-3s in it. And he got skin problems. And when they put omega-3s in them, skin problems disappeared. That was 1981. That was the year after I got poisoned. And the estimate that some people made, they said probably 99% of the population does not get enough omega-3s for optimum health. And I went ballistic. Oh my God. Oh my God. If we could make omega-3s are 5 times more sensitive to damage than omega-6s. So they're a nightmare to work with. I said, oh my God, if we can make them with health in mind and we can bring them back into the population, we could help almost everybody. Because insufficient omega-3 is the most widespread essential nutrient deficiency of our time, followed by magnesium at 80% and vitamin B6 about at 80% as well. And then other essential nutrients, lower percentages, 99%. And so it was like, oh my God, if we could bring it back, we could help almost everybody. And there's something that feels really good in here, in your heart, in your chest, when you can help people make their life better. There's just something built into us that makes helping feel good. And I was like, oh my God, I found a purpose for life. This is a good purpose. This is worth doing. In fact, this has to be done. And then I worked on it for 15 years before I made any money. I actually moved in with my mother and I wrote my first book and I got free room and board and I was able to help her when she had a stroke. So the whole thing worked out quite remarkably beautifully. And so then in 1986, end of 1986, we began to make flax oil because it is the richest source of omega-3s that is easily available to people. So I think that's a that's a short version of the long story, because the long story would take about 80 years to tell.
Well, I believe I read that first book, and I think you wrote subsequent books. I know that I bought your oils, I bought your products. I have a couple of questions that come even from what you say.
Yeah.
So let's assume that you make oil, and it's based on the question that you asked that researcher. You used the organic, clean seeds.
Yep.
And so you're starting well.
Yep.
Are they going to be completely free of pesticides because there is leaching from the neighboring farms that use glyphosate and other such things?
Well, that's difficult to say because I know I went salmon fishing in Alaska and there's PCBs, dioxins, and pesticides in Alaska salmon, which you would think were so remote that there wouldn't be anything.
Yeah.
And that's a problem that we have created. We human beings have created. So is it completely clean? It cannot be guaranteed. But your chances of having less pesticides in organic oils or organic foods than in non-organic foods are
absolutely
very good.
Yes.
And so what I say is,
absolutely.
Until we clean up the planet, we all have to do the best we can. And then
we do the best we can, right?
Yeah, and then not burn ourselves out worrying about it. Because one day the body, the body is a temporary situation, and one day the body will check out, and we have to accept that and enjoy it to the
it's really funny
best
when
possible.
When you say, those people who go, the reincarnation route, whether we are there or not, will say you basically change your body like you change a car. And when you talk about the oil and its essential nature for our body, even for a car, oil is essential.
Yep. And you also every once in a while drain out the dirty oil and replace it with clean oil. And that's my title.
So I have a question.
Your body needs an oil change just like your car.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Dirty oil out, clean oil in.
So there are many circulating opinions that marine-based, omega-3s are superior to plant-based. So can you talk about I think you pioneered even using flax. So can you talk about flax versus the marine sources?
Okay. The reason why we worked with seed oils, first of all, it's the most stable form of omega-3, alpha-linolenic acid. EPA and DHA in fish oils are 5 times more sensitive to damage, which is why you get the burps from the fish oil, which is why if you buy it in a bottle and keep it in your fridge, within days of you opening the cap, you can already smell the rancidity of that oil because they are so fast acting. But what we did was a little different, because we said, listen, if 99% of the population doesn't get enough of the starting material to make what the fish oils contain, because we have the genes to do that, then the problem that needs to be fixed is not, let's throw some fish oils at it. The problem that needs to fix, optimize your intake of the basic material that your body needs, that life needs to make the fish oil in your body, where and how much and when it needs it. So it has better metabolic control. And my view is that the biggest issue was we're not getting enough starting material. Of course you will get no conversion if you have no starting material. So let's do that first and see if that does it. I don't use fish oils. I purposely don't use fish oils because I'm here to prove that when you get enough of the alpha-linolenic acid, the plant omega-3, your body will make everything else from that. And it's not just EPA and DHA. It's eicosanoid hormones. It's prostaglandins, prostacyclins, leukotrienes, thromboxanes. And then it also makes resolvins, which are powerful anti-inflammatories, and protectins, which are powerful antioxidants, and maricins, which are anti-inflammatories for the immune system, and endocannabinoids that elevate your mood. These are all made from this basic material. So number one issue should be you got to get the basic material undamaged in optimum quantities in the right ratio with omega-6s because they compete in some ways in the body. It should be in glass because plastic leaches into oils quicker than into water. So that's another issue. And you need to basically, if you do all that, then you've given your body the best chance of making all of these derivatives that you need that are not essential because your body can make them out of ALA. And then you're going to end up with your body being in the best shape that's possible.
So you're saying flax is much more stable, it will keep better, it's more abundant, and we need to solve the primary problem, which is getting the building blocks. So from that standpoint, flax.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean,
and that is the primary problem. But if for advertising purpose, in marketing purpose, when we came out with flax oil, that week, one of the companies that makes fish oil said the body can't convert flax oil into fish oil. The research was already there, showed that it can, but they did that because for turf protection. And before that they said, before that they said, 30% of the population can't convert enough. So that means 70% don't need it. But then it changed to the body can't convert. And that was totally marketing based.
I see. So marketing can actually buy you a slogan, and a slogan reaches people in the best way, really. So if you put out a slogan about flax, it's going to circulate and percolate, and here I am, and I'm parroting it, to you in a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean that's interesting. Now,
and let me say one other thing. When we talk about an essential nutrient, that the word essential has a very specific definition that was created by researchers on the basis of studies. And I gave you that definition, the 3-part definition. But in the marketplace, people are always telling you fish oils are essential. But they're not. They're essential. EPA and DHA are essential fatty acid derivatives that your body can make. Therefore, they're not essential. But that distinction isn't made, and marketing, in a way, people hear more marketing than they hear research. And so that's where the confusion then comes from. They're misusing the term. And of course, you understand why they do it. If you can convince people that whatever it is you're doing, whether it's essential or not, but if you can convince people that this is essential, then people will say, on the basis of what they just heard, they'll just say, well, if it's essential, I better take it. Right? And that creates a dilemma. We would call it lying on the farm. Misrepresentation is a longer word for it, but it's basically lying, and it's based on lying for market share. And that's true
so
in every
aspect. Now there's a modern
aspect.
name for it.
Yeah.
The modern term is now misinformation.
Yes. Yeah. Misinformation, disinformation. Yeah. And you don't know who's lying to whom,
Okay.
and maybe everybody's lying to everybody. And that's tough.
So I have a question about ratios.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that there needs to be a certain ratio between omega-3 and omega-6.
Yep.
And there needs to be maybe even a certain ratio. Some people lately I hear about DHA being weighted more heavily as important than EPA. Can you talk about those ratios in general?
Yeah. Well, the ratio goes like this. Out of omega-3, the body makes hormone-like regulating molecules called eicosanoids. And it's a whole series of molecules. There's a dozen of them and more. And those have anti-inflammatory, generally speaking, anti-inflammatory properties. Out of omega-6, the body makes two series of eicosanoids. One is anti-inflammatory and the other one is pro-inflammatory, because omega-6s and inflammation play a role in healing. Inflammation is part of the healing process. And when the healing is done, then the inflammation goes down, especially if you have omega-3s that provide control over the omega-6s. And they do that. So they have some control over the omega-6s. If you have long-term inflammation from omega-6s, and there is that as well, that comes from the damage done to the molecules by the processing and by food preparation. So that's a completely different issue. But the ratio is important because they have some opposing functions. And it's like a dance. It's like the dance between a man and a woman, right? Something good comes out of it, right? But it's not an easy relationship. And in a way that happens on the molecular level in other ways as well. In terms of EPA and DHA, well, lucky for us, EPA is converted to DHA in the body, and DHA can be retroconverted into EPA in the body. So if you get one, you get the other. And if you get alpha-linolenic acid, which we're talking about right at the bottom of it, it will turn into EPA, and there's a system, it's like alpha-linolenic acid turns into stearidonic acid. Stearidonic acid turns into eicosapentaenoic acid. Eicosapentaenoic turns into docosahexaenoic acid. And there are other molecules that are made from those molecules. So it's a series, and EPA and DHA are connected in that series in both ways. Forward convert to DHA, backward convert DHA into EPA. So, so when they say, oh yeah, that's mostly marketing. If you get enough of the starting material, your body will make everything you need in the amounts you need it, in the tissues that need it, when it needs them. And basically you can trust that system because that's like 4.5 billion years old. And it's been figuring out how to make molecules dance properly for all that time. And everything that didn't work got discarded and recycled.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this interview. Thank you for joining us today. I know you love what's coming next in part 2. Be sure to click the subscribe button for more videos.